A coping mechanism, this is a phrase that I've actually sort of coined to describe what I believe is an array of the different things that people do in order to survive in the face of their needs not being met. And everybody to some degree is going to have coping mechanisms in some form. Of course, coping often means suppressing the emotions that you're feeling, whatever they might be. It doesn't matter whether it's anger or jealousy or hurt or sadness or rage or frustration. It might be that we're needing to reach out and in some way suppress that or stuff it down. Of course, that's not the healthy option, but to some degree we are all going to need a coping mechanism in our lives. Now, of course, classically we can talk about coping mechanisms such as alcohol, such as street drugs, things like gambling, things like compulsive shopping, things like addiction to sex. A lot of these things are all coping mechanisms. And there's another coping mechanism which in fact far more people rely on than you might think, and certainly more often than most mainstreamers might think, and that is the coping mechanism of food. I say that a lot of people mainstream don't realize they're using this coping mechanism because they are constantly doing it. It becomes a constant feeding of an addiction. And before I go any further, I would just like to clarify a little bit about addictions. Your body, the same as mine, is completely programmed to survive. There is absolutely nothing in your body that is programmed to self-destruct. It just doesn't happen. I was reminded of this again actually with this little moorhen that we saved. I mean, it was just absolutely determined to survive despite the fact that it had been abandoned, and you could tell that by the way it was screaming out for its mother as loud as it could 24 hours a day. It didn't just give up. We are programmed to survive. So when people say, well, my body is craving alcohol or my body is craving chocolate or whatever, because I have a scientific background, I find this very difficult to swallow, excuse the pun, because I know that the body doesn't crave things that destroy it. But what I do know is that things like alcohol and cannabis and cocaine and other such things bring about a shift in our experience of life. They bring about a shift. Now that shift might be that we become stimulated, as in caffeine. It might be that we become subdued. It might be that we become sleepy. It could be any number of different shifts, but it's a change from the experience that we were currently having before we imbibed in that particular substance. And I believe that it is an addiction to that shift that takes place, and not a physiological craving of the substance itself. Obviously this is open to some conjecture, and I'm sure there's many people that would argue that point and so on and so forth, and that's fine. I'm just sharing with you the way that I see it with my background in science. The more in fact I study psychology, the more I think, yes, this is what is happening. We are getting hooked on something that's helping us to cope with not having our needs met. Now we have a need, an innate need, of course, for love, and the most important of which being self-love. And if we imbibe in something we know that is not healthy for us and not good for our bodies and not what we really want to be doing, we start to feel badly about ourselves, and so the ability to love ourselves becomes even harder. And so our need becomes even more and more unmet for self-love and acceptance, and so of course we go and have even more of the substance we're using to have a shift in experience. Does that make sense? But food is a classic way of doing this. It's easy to get away with because everyone needs to eat 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, so no one's going to say, oh, I caught you, you had food in your hand, the same way they will with a bottle of gin. So food's actually a quite easy social one to use. Now the thing is that when you look at your body's physiology, what you will find is that you have a nervous system that runs throughout your organism. And this nervous system runs on something which is actually a low voltage electrical current called nerve energy. We use it up in everything we do. When we are talking, when we're using our minds in a cognitive sense, when we're physically playing, doing sports and other things, physical exertion uses it up. Emoting, in other words, experiencing and creating your own emotions, is one of the most expensive things you can do on your nervous system. It drains it. And I'm sure that you might be able to relate to having perhaps gone through a big upset or a big argument with somebody close to you, or having gone through even a bereavement, and how the emotions involved in that have resulted in you feeling very tired afterwards. Yeah? Feeling exhausted. It can even happen when you're having a great time. Take children that go to a party. Like Francesca, she goes to these parties and they're just having a blast, you know, they've got the bouncy castle going and the whole business. And it's not just the physical energy she's putting out, it's the excitement. And that's when I know I get an evening, because she goes crash, okay? It's really expensive on your nervous system. So whether it's positive or negative emotions, what we're going to find is that when you're experiencing them, your body has to divert a lot of its nervous energy and its nervous system to being involved in the creation of emotions. Now, you've only got so much energy, or this nerve energy, in your body at any given time. You don't have an endless supply of it. It just goes on and on and on, and you can sort of use it up, you know, willy-nilly wherever you want. You use it up throughout the day, and there becomes a point for most adults around 10 o'clock at night when you think, oh, my batteries have run out. My nervous energy of my nervous system's run out. I need to go and lie down and put myself on charge, which is what sleep is, and I need to charge myself up again. Now, if your body is only really good at focusing on one thing that takes a lot of nervous energy at any one time, we start to understand why food works so well as an emotional narcotic, as I call it, or an emotional analgesic or painkiller. And the reason is because food is the other thing that takes up enormous amounts of your body's nervous force and nervous energy. When you take one bite out of an apple, your body actually has to conduct something like 1,300 chemical interactions in order for you to digest that apple and absorb that apple into your bloodstream and then assimilate it and utilize it in whatever way your body needs. Now, all of those 1,300 chemical reactions take nervous energy. It requires your brain to be in communication with your physiology. It's exhausting. And I used to sort of find it quite amusing that they always showed The Sound of Music at Christmas. You know the movie? Every Christmas, that's what's on. Actually, it's my favourite movie, I have to tell you. And Francesca's too. She wants to grow up to be Liesl, apparently. Anyway, The Sound of Music is always shown at Christmas. The reason why? Because no one's ever seen it. And do you know why they've never seen it? Because they eat the richest conglomeration of food at Christmas than they ever eat the rest of the year. The combinations, the substances, it's such an enormously heavy digestive task. The second they've finished it and the matinee performance of The Sound of Music comes on, they press the remote control, Sound of Music begins, and then they go and they're out. They have to sleep, they have to recharge their nervous energy because the food, the process of digesting it, has drained so much of their energy. So they keep showing The Sound of Music every year because no one's actually ever seen it. So this is how food actually leaves us in an emotionally numb state. And this is the bottom line. You cannot go through intense emotions while at the same time going through a big digestive task. They are both too energy demanding from your nervous system. You can do one, eat, or the other, emote. You cannot do both to any great degree. So take two people that go through some terrible upset, perhaps a bereavement in their life. Now, one person is so busy emoting and being emotional that they lose their appetite. Their body knows that there is no neurological force available for the processes of digestion, so it's shut down. And they just emote, and they tend to lose weight. And someone sees them in the street a month later after this beloved one's died, and they say, oh my goodness, you've lost so much weight. Then there's another person who is faced with a bereavement, but they cannot face the intensity of emotions that they might experience, and so they eat, and they sit up through the night eating as they cry away the loss of this person. And you know, they don't really get to emote that much because their available nervous force is too busy digesting their meal. And a month later you see them in the street and you say, ooh, they put on a bit of weight since so-and-so died. It can work either way. But this is how we numb ourselves with food, and it's very, very easy to do.